Welcome to After Credits here on the Intercut podcast channel, where we review a new movie, including everything that comes after the credits. I am your co-host Zachary Shevich, and joining me, he went from dad bod to god bod. It's Arturo
I'm gonna
Zurita.
get the locks too by the next one. So by Thor 5, I expect we'll be golden. But we're here on the fourth Thor movie. Who would have thought that out of all the
Yeah,
superheroes, this is the only dude to get four of them? Nobody else.
yeah. If we took a poll around the time that the first Avengers movie came up, what do you think the chances are that Thor would have been the least likely choice to get four of these
Literally,
movies?
I mean, he had some of the rockiest ones with 1 and 2. I would say. I mean, now in retrospect, a lot
Mhm.
of people really love those, and they wanted to go back to that. But I
Should we start there? What do you make of this like reappraising of Thor: The Dark World now that we've
it's
had seen Thor 4?
well, I'm not accepting it because I think it's one of the most boring villains. But I would rather take a boring villain than a disappointing one, in my opinion.
Mm,
But I mean, you had the first Thor that,
foreshadowing.
yeah, that came from shadowing. You had the first Thor that came from Kenneth Branagh, right? Too many Dutch angles
Yes,
for my taste, but at least it had something going for it. You know, he had his distinct
that's
tone.
the perspective.
Yeah, you even saw it in what was his movie that he won his Oscar for? He had him as a little kid
Belfast, yeah.
reading Thor. You know, there was some passion there. Thor: The Dark World. You got a good director in Alan Taylor who's done a lot of TV shows, was doing Game of Thrones shows. Not for me. I have a third rewatch to add to there. I don't see it. But I can see you being someone who's really into the mythology of Thor and then going into Thor Ragnarok where I would say if Thor 4 is being pitched as his midlife crisis, then this was the actor and filmmaker's midlife crisis, cutting off his hair, making it a comedy. I think it's very well known that Chris Hemsworth did not want to deal with being this like very serious person, and thus he went on this whole run of
Hmm.
not just Thor but Bad Times in the El Royale. He was in the Ghostbusters movie. He was in the
Yeah.
Men in Black. I call it Mission Impossible. He's not been in that. He was in the Men in Black movie with Tessa Thompson. Really wanted to do the comedic streak. I personally still love Thor Ragnarok. It is in my top five, and this
Same.
is where I think it hits on all cylinders. For the people who complained about Thor Ragnarok, I kind of see what y'all were talking about with this one.
Yeah, definitely a good day for the Ragnarok haters out there. We are not among them. I mean, I would
No,
even go
I
so
am
far
not.
as to say that Ragnarok might be my favorite of the MCU movies, partially because it is so distinctive and it has this personality that feels so different than the rest of them. And also, I like comedies, and when something can make me laugh, I forgive it for a lot of the other things that it will do. But this one did not make me laugh so much.
Mm.
Let's get into Thor: Love and Thunder, the fourth solo film for Thor, and the second from writer-director Taika Waititi. Waititi's last MCU film was Thor Ragnarok, the movie that took the dark self-serious Thor and turned him into the disarmingly oafish character that he's since become.
Yup.
Uh, but given how much more successful we both think Ragnarok was,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think happened here? Did Taika Waititi just lose his touch, or is it just like an overindulgence of this side of the character?
So I guess there's two ways to look at it because to a lot of people, if you don't like this movie, he's still consistent. He's the same. You just don't like Taika. No, I think you could be critical of the stuff that's in there. I have
Yeah.
said that since he won his Oscar for JoJo, I felt like acting Taika has been all over the place. I did not care so much
Hmm.
for his character in Lightyear. It very much feels like he came in, did his little ad libs. They work around that. I did not like his character in Free Guy. I've not liked his character in a couple of the stuff that he's been in, except for when it comes to TV. I still think What We Do in the Shadows and in the Our Name Is Death show, he's pretty decent. I was worried it would get to his directing. And this is
Mm.
where I see it. Like I was saying, if the previous one was them trying to do something new, here they just take everything that worked in Ragnarok and did it again, which gets rid of the novelty of
Right.
Ragnarok. But I also think this is them. I'm going to say it right now, and by the end of this podcast, I hope people understand what I'm saying. This is their Adam Sandler's grown up.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely like an indulgent, almost victory lap of sorts, right? Like I feel like they're doing the things that were so well that were responded to so well from the last one, and just diving deeper into them. Like whether it's the recreating of the events of the Thor universe with the Thor acting troupe led by Matt Damon, and they bring in Melissa McCarthy this time because isn't it funny when someone famous shows up as like an unknown actor in this world?
Yeah, and we're getting
like,
full spoilers.
Like,
for someone who actually thinks that this may be a spoiler, we're gonna go full spoilers. But I agree with you; it was funnier the first time. This is what I mean, because it's not just McCarthy. Did you notice Ben Falcone, her husband, is standing next to her, bro? The whole bit.
They have like the opposite of a restraining order. They're not allowed outside of 100 feet of each other. Like, why is he attached at her hip?
I have absolutely no idea, but this is what I mean. I feel like they're taking it to the point where, like in Grown Ups, where they just cast their family and they're going on vacation. They're like, who else in Hollywood is doing? Ben Falcone and Melissa McCarthy, they're married. They always are attached to the hips. And I feel like there's something about how they made this movie that connected with those two. There's something about the filmmaking of this movie that, as cool as it is to milk off the MCU, to like have a movie with your friends and family,
right?
At what point do you start becoming like the Ben Falcone, Melissa McCarthy movies where y'all having a good time and that's great for y'all? Grown Ups look like a fun movie to make. It's not a fun movie to watch. That's what this felt like for them.
That's a great point, because I often feel when I'm watching Ben Falcone's comedies that they're not so much jokes as much as they are like referencing ideas that could be jokes.
Yes.
Right? Like, in his new show, God's Own Favorite Idiot or whatever, it's like, he's glowing. That's so funny. He's glowing. But not like actual jokes about the fact that he's glowing. And we get a lot of that in Thor Love and Thunder. Particularly, I feel like you feel that with the Guardians in the beginning of this movie, where they're forced to kind of sit on the sidelines and watch as Thor takes out like a whole enemy battalion. And it's kind of just like Dave Bautista standing around in costume going like shrugging or whatever. Like, they didn't even really have the forethought to give him a funny quip. Nope. At that moment. Chris Pratt looks extremely bored, and for Chris Pratt, that's saying something.
So I have a theory, right? And I have some backup with this as well. So when it came to the Guardians things, the way that they rated it Marvel is that he's got to like submit the script. So Taika's got to go ask, hey, Gunn, do they speak like this? And then they have to go to Taika, hey, does Thor speak like this? So it feels like they're asking for permission, I guess, to like stay within the bounds of continuity, which, you know, sometimes they pick, sometimes they don't. I agree with you, bro. If you're in the bathroom for too long at the beginning thinking that the trailers are going to run a little bit long, you may miss the Guardians of the Galaxy. They are nothing but an Uber pool for this man to get to the next destination that he needs to go. Yeah. They are just guest starring here. And there's something cool about it. I like the titles at the end where like it features them. But the trailers lied to you as if they were going to be on this cosmic adventure, which could have been a really cool buffer movie between this and 5. Mm-hmm. It just feels like they know they're kind of on the clock for things, and they got Guardians 3, which is going to be their end movie, so we really don't have time to do something like what Ragnarok did. And if we're going to compare, you know, the same jokes, let's compare the things that they do the same but are different, which is having that cameo appearance. The cameo appearance in Ragnarok was Hulk. They used that to perfection. It feels almost like like half a Hulk movie. This does not feel like half a Guardians movie. So already there with the guest appearance that they've had, we've seen it do it better in Ragnarok. And yes, this man did not want to be there. There is a point where you feel like he's staring at Chris going, you're the executive producer on this one, aren't you? Can I get to the project where I'm the executive producer? Because you could feel like they're going off of the tempo and jokes that are Taika's and Chris's. And they're Aussies. This man over here wants to get back to James Gunn where he could do his style of humor. There is literally a joke that consists of Chris Hemsworth, and it's in the trailer, doing his bit, and Chris Pratt going, we're dragging this out, aren't we? And it almost feels like that's a deleted scene.
Yeah. It feels like something that was maybe ad-libbed and should have been on the cutting room floor.
Like a lot of it.
I think it's also that most of that Guardian stuff is really, as you mentioned, stuffed into the beginning and done through the very annoying Korg narration that bookends this movie. They've gone from using Korg as this sort of comedic relief that pops up in moments that you least want that kind of comment being made, to just making him the de facto narrator of events here, not just when he's literally the narrator, but even as things are going on, Korg's going to break this down into layman's terms for us. Okay. Yeah. And it took what I thought was like a pretty fun character and made him very tiresome.
I mean, his whole thing in the movie is that he dies, right? Which they can die. We see
Right.
that in Thor 2. I don't know if you've gone back to see Dark World with everybody rewatching it now. There is a point where he practically kills his cousin, dude. There's this rock dude comes right up to him, bam, dead on the spot. Korg doesn't die because it turns out I almost laugh at the absurdity of what you're getting away with here. Korg's mouth, voiced by Taika Waititi, if that isn't destroyed, Korg can continue to live. And there's something about it that it's like it upsets you, but then at the same time it's like you're just getting away with it. You're breaking the fourth wall to a degree where you're just saying, as long as I can continue to voice it in some way, shape, or form, I don't care if I have to do the mocap. The whole point of Korg is for Taika to cast himself in a movie and to just be able to say his one-liners. But yeah, I agree with you. There's a novelty to Korg that's better than the first one. But I like a story arc in this new one. It's a very much a story of fathers.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. It's cute, but I think part of it is also I'm getting to the point where I'm disliking Taika, the actor, and it's bleeding into all of his appearances.
This is the best he's been so far, but I agree with you. Not better than what he did the first time around.
Yeah. All right. So one last thing on the repetitive jokes, the goats. Like I thought that. We talked about this before on Intercut, but I've since seen an interview with Taika where he said the goats were supposed to be silent, and then somebody during the editing used the Taylor Swift meme sound, and that's what convinced them to put it in. So they are literally ripping jokes from 2013 for this movie.
Bro, I told you that these were some 2011 jokes. I didn't know that we actually had a circa date of 2013, which, if I would argue with you, is the peak of the goat joke. So the goats were already out there, and then in 2013, someone's like, all right, let's kill it here. The final, the magnum opus, put it on the Taylor Swift thing. Funny meme at the time. He said he literally ripped the sound from the meme. Like, it's not like a matter of, maybe he was inspired. No, he literally went and got the same goat sound from the meme. So, yeah it's already 10 years old at this point.
And I think part of it is also just the overkill of it, too. Devesh in our live stream is saying that he thinks the goats are funny and he's going to die on that hill. I'll admit that the fourth time that they screamed, I maybe chuckled a little, like, oh, they're really going all in. And then they do it like 10 more times. Mm-hmm. It's just a lot. It's a lot, and it's a lot when there's not a bunch of fresher jokes surrounding it.
Mm-hmm. I feel you. But, yeah, I would say the novelty and everything in the first one, even to the disguise. I rewatched Ragnarok after Thor 4, and I was just like, well, they have a disguise bit here, too. It's funnier. Oh, they have the bit where they're like talking about the science stuff because of Banner being a scientist. It's funnier here. There's just a lot more elements that work better in Ragnarok.
About the elements that worked or maybe didn't. Let's start with Chris Hemsworth's performance. I think these movies really do rely on him to kind of be the uniting factor in terms of navigating the tone, navigating the drama and the comedy and the whimsical nature, but keeping it grounded at times. I thought Hemsworth is still pretty funny here. I like that moment early in the film where he's doing the splits. I thought that was funny. It's maybe, it's a lot more of the same, but he wasn't my problem with most of this movie, at least. Yeah,
I mean, they're playing off of the story arc that he went between Ragnarok and what would be this, which Korg, I think, recaps really nicely. I like Thor's story arc. From the first movie to the second movie to what he's had to do in Infinity War, which I think is one of his best entrances. I know Fat Thor got a lot of pushback, but it was interesting to see a character actually feel the failure out of the events of what happened in Endgame, which is why there's an element in this movie, and I know we're going to get into it a little bit later, but do you remember what he saw in Infinity War? What is his whole big thing in Infinity War? He failed to do one thing. He did not aim for the head. He aimed for the chest. And thus he sees the snap, and it's what haunts him for the rest of his days. And he lives there in that new Asgard land. So tell me, Zach, why there's an Infinity Cones with the icon being the thing that killed half of the universe? You don't have to, Zach.
Because they don't go back, I guess.
They don't care. They're like, oh, is that what that was used for?
Right?
Yeah, no, I think he's still consistent in trying to bring in the jokes. I don't think it's the funniest that he's been, and I think a lot of his riffs really just depend on who you have on the other side, and that's why I think that for this movie, they had mentioned that Tessa Thompson was able to get into the editing bay. So I implore people to go see that like Vanity Fair one that they did together, because now that she's been in the editing bay, she's letting slip how many mistakes there are in the edit. She's like, this take wasn't even for this take. That's why it doesn't make any sense. And I'm like,
yeah.
Wait, so I don't have to review and say that anymore? They're saying it for you. So yeah, it's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad. That's a good point that I think Hemsworth's performance gets better or worse depending on who he's able to riff against. Like, I think he's extremely funny when he's opposite Russell Crowe, for instance, because Russell Crowe is bringing in this very like over-the-top, silly accent, bravado type of character. And I think Crowe as Zeus, it's also very funny because he's kind of subverting that like gruff, masculine screen presence that Russell Crowe normally has. I love that little saunter he does down the stairs.
Yes.
So yeah, Hemsworth is very, very funny opposite somebody like Russell Crowe. I didn't think he was that funny opposite Natalie Portman, and
no,
I love Natalie Portman as an actress. I don't think she's like the best in comedies. Like, there's some comedies where she's a little bit better, but I think what the problem is here is they saddled her with a character that was incredibly inconsistent, like a character who is like badass and tough and ready to go get them and save the day in one moment, and then she's like meek and anxious and unsure of herself and second guessing her catchphrase in other moments.
Yeah.
Another running bit that like was never funny for me in this, and it just makes me feel bad for her that they couldn't seem to get her character right from moment to moment. They just wrote her to fill the needs of the scene.
On top of that, as you can see here, none of the advertisement kind of shows you her actual storyline, which we're in spoilers. It's the fact that Jane is going through chemo. She's in stage 4, and that's the reason why the hammer calls to her and is supposed to change her. And I agree with you. They just butcher her character completely. There's a God Butcher in this movie. Does no butchering. The only butchering was happening in the writing here, because you have an Academy Award-winning actress who can deal with like an actual profound story. There's like a mini flashback about how she too had to deal with her mother going through cancer and losing her, and this whole dedication to science, right? And there's a dope story there that's been building up since 1 and 2. She believes in science. He's like, nah, magic is science where we're from. And there's this whole thing about how science and magic are able to intertwine or, make each other better. She's always saying she needs to go back to the lab to work on something. And the moment she gets the power of Mjolnir and knows all these different things in the galaxy, she's like, oh yeah, curing whatever the hell? Who cares? What's my catchphrase? It's bad.
It's so bizarre. And it's also like, even the moment when she's supposed to get these powers, I felt like they kind of yada yada that whole section of the movie. She's like, she sees the hammer, and then next thing we know, it's one of those things where like, I don't need Marvel to over explain things to me, but I would like them to at least explain them, right?
They leaked it. The whole scene when she interacts with the hammer, the behind the scenes to it is out there, and it's just cut. Taika said something about directors' commentaries. I don't agree with him, especially when your own movie, a director's commentary or a director's cut, isn't just when you release something that had deleted stuff. If you don't consider it deleted because when you shot it, you didn't do a good job at it, that means that you still filmed it with the idea of it being part of the story. It didn't work out, and now it got cut. So yeah, it feels wonky. You're missing that.
Exactly.
And you're missing a lot of moments.
It kind of feels like the scene is missing those bridge moments. And I don't know if that's why this movie is under 2 hours long. It does feel a little bit like some of those things that will help make later moments feel more resonant, feel a little bit more earned, just are missing.
That's what I'm telling you. Yeah, they're the human relationship in the movie, but Thor's entire relationship with his axe, that's the funny part.
More human than anything, yeah.
More human than anything else. So I thought that's where he did a really good job with it.
Yeah, they also romantic tension between Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman throughout, because they obviously work together and have been apart for many years. Did you buy the romance elements? Did that work better than the comedy for you?
None of it. I don't think anything within the relationship is something that you really care about. I'm just gonna leave it at that. I don't think their back and forth is good at all. It does not feel like that. It feels like they're trying to do a flip of what 2 did, where she was like the damsel who missed him, and now he's the damsel who missed her. And I don't think it adds too much. It's also very tonally inconsistent, and we'll get there when we talk about Gore.
I think that's ultimately what it is. It's like it just, it's not that you can't do this sort of like cancer storyline and it's like they're just missing each other in this way, but it just is so jarring when put up to the rest of the movie that it kind of undercuts the seriousness of those scenes. And I get that some people are responding to them, but I don't think they're responding to the execution of it. I think they're just responding to the story.
Yeah. Devesh had brought up, best example is that you already have a really good cancer storyline in Guardians of the Galaxy, something that isn't a 10-second sequence, but actually plays off of the scene and has repercussions up until the second movie and even the third. So, it's something that's actually there because of the story. But yeah, I feel bad for Natalie. I really like Natalie. I'm glad she was able to make her money. Do you remember her sequence in Endgame where they go back to what would be 2013 and she's like there sleeping? She admitted during this press run she never did anything. Those are just deleted scenes from 2. She said it was the easiest paycheck she's ever gotten. So for that, Nat, enjoy it. There's another actor in here.
Yeah.
Homie, you've enjoyed it too. Because they did not give you anything to
Christian
work with in
Bale.
this movie.
Let's talk about it, because he also got that Disney paycheck and took the role of Gorr the God Butcher, one of the more thinly characterized villains in the MCU, I would say.
Literally.
But I think Bale is an interesting enough actor that he's still fun to watch. I did like how sinister he gets in that one scene where he has our heroes tied up. It kind of reminded me weirdly of Heath Ledger's Joker and the glee he takes in inflicting pain or inflicting torture in that way. But like that's all through Christian Bale just leaning into giving a hammy performance. It's not really through the writing of his character or how it's set up. I like that one sequence in the visually, but like the writing of it is very lazy, and it's another one of those things where the villain could very ended the story right there, but won't for the sake of the plot.
He's pretty much gone on the press run going, my kids made me take this. I fit it in between 2 things. There was a big thing. Obviously, it's really weird. How do you feel about this? Because I know you're detached to it. If the source material people, the comic fans, go, hey, this isn't like the character that you're basing it off, do they deserve to be hurt to some degree? Or is it, who cares?
I mean, I'm usually who cares, because it's also like it's an adaptation, right? Like,
for sure,
things change to be adapted to film. I mean, I don't know what has changed. Like, maybe sometimes they should just make a new character rather than,
that's a great point,
hurt a character that a lot of people care about. But yeah, for me, that's not something I'd really invest too much in.
So the character in the comic's supposed to be really built, and he came out of one movie really skinny, and he said, I gotta enter the next movie really skinny. You got me for a little bit. Is it cool if I don't work out? Taika said, yeah, man. Yes, it's so good, man. So that big transformation you want from Bale isn't really there. I'm not saying that it's lazy. I'm just saying that it's very interesting that you force an actor to be in there. Cut side of the character. Okay. Well, he's still a great actor. Let's see what he brings to the table, right? There's that one sequence. I agree with you. It's really good. Christian Bale's done nothing but throughout the entire press tour talk about, do you remember when you had me up on those stilts for 3 days and it wasn't in the movie? Do you remember when we did this bit in the cage and it's not in the movie and it's not in the movie and it's not in the movie? He has been describing a really interesting movie, and I want to see that. Director's cut don't exist, though. But I'm very curious to see what he did film, because he's the beginning of the movie, and the beginning of the movie is so serious, dude. There is a desert sequence where you're introduced to this drama of a dude losing his daughter and realizing that all the gods...
I'm laughing. Go ahead.
All the gods he worshipped don't see him as that at all. And it's this like damning story of a guy who's supposed to go up against these deities that he thought were there to be worshipped, but only they get an afterlife. He doesn't, which is a reoccurring thing in this movie, especially with the post-credits. Then it just goes into becoming a comedy, and then he'll come in, do something, go back to being a comedy. And at the end of it, I think the biggest line that stood out to me as he's been doing press tours is that Hemsworth and Taika told him, stop being too scary. You're scaring our kids. Because all the kids in this movie are their own kids.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we should just jump around a little and get to that bit because the way that this film and the MCU lately is like giving it to the children is interesting. That final action set piece sees Thor imbuing the children of New Asgardia with the power of Mjolnir so they can help him take down the monsters in the Shadow Realm. But Thor also ends up with a surrogate daughter by the end of the film, played by Chris Hemsworth's actual daughter. This comes after Wanda spent an entire show and then an entire Doctor Strange movie fixated on her children, as well as the introduction of Miss Marvel, who is the first top line child hero, I guess, for the MCU. Art, what do you make of the MCU's recent obsession with children, and as well as this movie?
I think the kid part makes sense. I think even pre-Infinity War, I remember like that was my big focus. I'm like, they're really gonna focus on the kids. It has to be the new generation.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. It's in that production side. This is why I called it grown-ups. The moment you start casting your own kids, we always have the joke every time we see a kid get a spotlight in a movie, where Alina and I go, I wonder whose producer kid that is. To know that the whole point of this movie is that the kids get kidnapped because Gore comes in, and now they have to retrieve these children, that they're all literally kids of Taika, kids of Chris, kids of Bale. That's cool for them.
Yeah.
It's cool for y'all.
What about us, though?
What about us, though? Dude, like, I guess, I don't think Thor has a daughter in the comics. But I mean, I want to blame him, but I don't want to blame him. I mean, what better present for your kid than I just created a role for you in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? He adopted his own daughter in the movie. Imagine writing that. That's pretty crazy right there.
It's pretty cool.
I guess.
It's cool for them, but I just don't really enjoy seeing it. And I think maybe there's also something about how close they are to some of these kids that is preventing them maybe like going a little bit crazier with some of this stuff.
That's exactly what they did.
Like, there's a moment, right? Like he is giving the power of the gods to a bunch of little kids. Like one of them is literally holding a stuffed teddy bear, and then it just like plays out like this like joke of a sequence that's not like, I don't know. There's nothing like dynamic about it or surprising about it. It's just like this adolescent fantasy. And if you're gonna be a little bit crazy with moments like that and try to make it comedic, I think you gotta like go a little bit further and make it gonzo, make it like weird how powerful these kids are, instead of just like, oh, they kind of had fun powers. And I don't know, it bothered me. There's something very sanitized to how they included all these kids.
This movie reminds me of Transformers 4. Let me explain. In Transformers 4, they do nothing but product placement. We have now entered the world of the MCU, where they're doing the product placement within the movie. The MCU used to be like they drove a car during a fight, and then the commercial that you see, during the playoffs or whatever else, would show you like the perspective of the kid on the inside. If they remade Civil War right now, that scene, that commercial would be inside the movie. I don't know if you saw Flo from Progressive is at the drive-in, for the Jurassic Park scene, the Jurassic World scene that got cut. In 5 years' time, I think we're going to see Flo in the Jurassic World universe. So we're at a point where it is so embarrassing. The first thing you messaged me coming out of the theater was, Old Spice is worn in Asgard? Why are we doing this?
Valkyrie have a brand deal? I thought she's supposed to be president of New Asgardia. Like, what is going on here?
I feel we're using comedy, which I noticed this past weekend. A lot of people deem comedies to be so low that they think they're using it as a defense. Oh, turn off your brain, it's just a comedy. That's disrespectful to comedies. They're using comedies as a way to be able to showcase ads, have people just play it off of, oh, it's just that. And then eventually, Zach, hear me out right here. You're going to get the new Avengers uniforms brought to you by Wish, brought to you by Shopify. Yeah, It's going to be like the NBA.
Like NASCAR drivers.
We're allowing this to happen right in front of us, Zach, in the sake of comedy. I don't know, man. That scene took me out. I thought it was like the worst thing in the world. And I know that I'm bigger on product placements than most people, but this is what I mean about how it could take it over to a degree that it's bad.
Well, that's like, I think I'm the opposite. Like, I'm usually pretty kind about product placement because I think there's a way to do it in which it kind of feels organic within the universe. But what was the purpose of this? They never referred to it again. She doesn't even have like any funny lines or whatever. It's like you said, like kind of just an advertisement for Old
100%.
Spice with some familiar characters. I don't know.
It's bad.
I think it definitely represents a low point of sorts for the MCU.
Um, I I don't know. I see that as not being a good future for the way that they're going to unfold that stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess it's efficient for them. They're able to just have it be that. But in terms of the kids, again, it's a great thing for them in terms of how they build their story. This is also a movie that primarily filmed in Australia, so I understand the efficiency of being able to have, your family there. But I do think that's what hinders this movie from
Sure.
the creative decisions they did in Ragnarok. So
Let's talk about. We've been talking about a lot of the things we didn't like about the movie. I do want to mention one of the things that I actually thought was compelling is the sequence done on the Shadow Realm. It has this black and white look
hmm
to it with pops of color, but also this really distinctive lighting. And it's one of these moments that I think a lot of people have been asking for from the MCU is that to like take more visual risks, like change the palette, do something a little more dynamic. It turns out this scene was actually developed with the help of a company called Satellite Lab and technology that they made called Plate Light, which uses high-speed cameras and lights to simultaneously shoot different lighting setups that allows the filmmaker to change the lighting of a scene in post-production, which is crazy. It's also Taika's second collaboration with Satellite Lab after they used their dynamic light technology to do the kind of memorable Valhalla flashback sequence in Thor
that
Ragnarok
one I
that had
liked.
the kind of ultra slow motion stuff going on. I just think this is pretty fascinating tech. There's a couple videos on their Vimeo page, which maybe we'll link to in the description down below. But yeah, I mean, did you like this sequence? Did you like how it looked, or was it almost like too different from the rest of the movie?
I liked the idea of it because there are other movies where they've had black and white sequences that have just been cut. I'm looking at the Nicolas Cage movie, and this felt like you can put a black and white sequence in here and make something interesting about it. I do think it's one of the most visually appealing things they've had in this, but it's nowhere in comparison to the Valkyrie scene in Ragnarok. Having rewatched that one looks freaking gorgeous. This feels like they weren't as prepared and they wanted to fix something that shouldn't be fixed in post, dude. They shot half of this movie, probably most of it, on
Hmm.
the what's it called, that Mandalorian used, which Taika worked it up so
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
But the Batman is used the best on the volume. I'll keep going between calling it the Vision and the Volume. I think it's called the Volume,
yeah.
where you got the LED screens around you. That means though that you need to have everything pre-prepared. They're not green screens where you're going to fix it in post. You are preparing for it. This is another one where I feel you have to prepare for it. And considering how they ad-lib a bunch of stuff, I don't know. I feel like that's why a lot of the scenes seem wonky. We also know that this was a movie that was on the pressure cooker.
Yeah.
The trailer came out so late. And one of the IMDb trivia
Hmm.
facts is one of the first movies to have the press run begin before before the trailer was even out. Yeah, a lot of stuff is still being fixed in the movie, and I really like this sequence. I just don't think it was done as well as they used this tech in the previous movie. My opinion.
Yeah. And it is a funny note that you mentioned that, like, yes, it gives it a certain distinctive visual quality, but it also speaks to the ways in which Marvel likes to cut corners and leave things, editable up until the last moment. Like they could, with this technology, shoot scenes that are day and night and then choose later what it looks like. So, I mean, maybe the future is that they're just going to use this tech for all their movies so that they can just decide, oh, the scene that took place at 3 p.m. actually should take place at
Yeah,
7 a.m.
and that's cool.
But that it's kind of cool, but like, yeah, I think you want it to at least like have more than just that. I do like that they got the black and white look to it, but yeah, the way it was staged wasn't really, it doesn't really help. Like the action wasn't really dynamic
Oh, there's
to
no action
match
in
the
this movie.
dynamic lighting.
There's no
Yeah.
action in this movie without it. Yeah, none of that is in there. But I agree with you. You know it's bad when in Eternals, we always go back to this. When she asked Feige, can we go film in the forest? And he said, the forest? They're so
What?
used to filming
Nature?
in, yeah, they're so used to filming in lots. So I appreciate
Or
stuff
Best
like
Buy parking lots, apparently.
that. Bro, what? Yeah, look into that if you guys haven't. They filmed water in a parking lot. I don't know. Watch the Sea Beast. They knew what they were doing with the water over there. But yeah, I love the technology. It's always a great tool in a filmmaker's toolbox, but you still got to know how to play it. Just because you have a really fancy guitar does not mean that you're going to know how to play that really fancy guitar, if that makes any sense. It still comes down to the person doing stuff. And I know they could do it because they did it in Ragnarok, just didn't do it in this one.
For sure. All right, let's get into those post-credits scenes, the reason that a lot of people show up for these movies. The first of the two scenes sees the surprisingly not dead Zeus doing on revenge. Like, they can't even kill the bit characters in these movies.
I wouldn't have
and here, well, I mean, he's the best performance in the movie, so I'm glad they didn't.
Also,
but,
it's 2022 style. We don't kill the characters anymore. We're gonna have a whole list
Zeus
of that.
Here, yeah, Zeus enlists the help of his son Hercules, played surprisingly to me at least by Ted Lasso's Brett Goldstein. Are you excited for Brett Goldstein's Hercules?
Only if he gets to swear in Thor 5.
Right.
That's it.
How can you cast Roy Kent and not give him like access to his full vocabulary?
That's all I need. I think he's a good choice for it. If we're talking about like a possible future for Thor's death, what better way to bring in Hercules? Like, what would make Hercules cooler than killing the only person who's lasted this long and gone 4 solo movies, 4 phases in the MCU, 4 movies in the MCU? Whoever kills that person, I mean, what
legend?
That's a legend right there. So I think you'd bring it to the table, but we'll see. Every single thing for these Marvel movies has literally just been, every post-credit has just been like, look at this character that you'll see 2 years later from now, 2 years later. Even the post-credits are more appetizers than ever before, so I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I like him a lot. It is pretty crazy to think, like, are we going to go from the villains of the last 2 Thor movies being Cate Blanchett and Christian Bale to Brett Goldstein? No disrespect to Brett, who I love on Ted Lasso, and I also really love his podcast. I think it's Films I Want to Be Buried With, something like that. I just didn't realize he was on that level yet, but he's a great actor. So, yeah. And I think he also is convincingly tough in a way that would serve as a nice counter to a guy like Thor. So I am excited for his return whenever that is. It kind of feels like we might not see him for another 5 years. Yeah. Like, when are we ever going to see some of these people again? When is Harry Styles going to be back in the MCU?
You get all these new faces and you never know when you're going to see them. I will say though, if his big
point is Majors.
I hope he's still the big bad guy, bro. But we'll see. They've introduced so many people. That's what I'm saying. Thor 5, if it's going to continue being a comedy, right? Who better to play off of, right?
Great point.
Should be good.
Great point. And then in the final credits sequence, Jane enters Valhalla and meets up with Heimdall, played by Idris Elba, as of course, who previously died in Thor Ragnarok. Art, do you think this is just a nice sign-off to 2 beloved actors, or is the MCU trying to leave the door a crack open for the possibility of their returns?
You know it's the latter, dude. Rewatching all 4 of them, too, didn't even mention Valhalla. It's got Loki asking, are we gods, and Odin saying no. And 3 happened, and then 4, and they're like, actually, we could bring back a lot of these characters over here. Yeah. So with the Valhalla series, I don't know how they're going to tie it into everything else, but that's why I'm saying that there's a version of Thor 4 where the elements that they were building towards have been stripped down. If you have a villain who is mad there is no afterlife and then proceed to show gods who do have an afterlife, then you're missing a lot of Christian Bale's character. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, that's what ends up being the post-credit scene. And they almost feel like 2 different things that clearly have a cohesive connection that was lost somewhere in the edit. I don't know how they're going to connect it. It could be its own show. At this point, you do have past relationships between both of Thor's parents who would be dead, and they would be here. Technically, there is a character I want to bring up that I know we have not, and I feel it's pretty bogus because she has been a big fighter and warrior alongside Thor since the beginning, but it's Jamie Alexander Sifs, one of the first, nowhere in the credits, nothing. I have to pull up a red carpet picture of her, but she has been there since 1. Leading up to 2, she was promised her own like story arc. That was in 2013, Zach. Her first female superhero would have been Captain Marvel 2019. So it's not just to her. They have belittled everything dealing with all of his buddies in the Thor universe. But if one person should have gotten more, it should be Jamie Alexander. I was surprised to see her come back here. She loses an arm, so now she's just a trainer. Thinks she's a warrior enough to train more, but who knows? Maybe her hand's going to be in Valhalla floating around like Thor said he would, and you're going to have this wacky Valhalla spinoff series. Would you, I don't know, would you even watch that, Zach? Does it even matter?
I personally, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know, man. How big are we going to get? How many universes do we need?
You got multiverses, you got
let's just
afterlives.
focus on the main stories, right?
Yeah. We got to milk it, Zach, so it's all going to be there.
I don't know. I mean, we'll see how tired people are of these, because there's kind of after this opening weekend. Thor 4 made $143 million domestically. It is the third highest opening weekend of 2022 after Doctor Strange 2 and Jurassic Park 6. That's how I've chosen to refer to it. Notably, it is higher than Top Gun Maverick, although we'll see. That alone makes it just its opening weekend gross makes it the 8th highest grossing movie of this year. It's already made more money than the Sandra Bullock Channing Tatum movie The Lost City. Combined. Just to put things in perspective a second. It's Marvel's 12th biggest opening weekend after 29 of these movies, and it globally in $302 million, which would make it the 30th biggest opening for a film ever. Any reaction to those big numbers?
There was a stat that came out recently about the $100 million back-to-back movies, which I'll bring up really quick. But what I have up there is 144 for this one. For reference, Ragnarok was 122. So, right, that's good.
Growing.
Continues to go up. On its 4th, that's solid. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I've definitely. There's a lot of interest in that character and in these films still. I think that 100 million stat you're referencing this is only like the 3rd or 4th time that we've had $100 million opening weekends in back-to-back movies.
That's a weird stat.
The previous 2 times were like years were pre-pandemic.
Yeah, and it's always an animated movie and then like a big action movie. Animated movie, big action movie. I think it's like the 3rd time that it's happened. I don't think that counts like a big movie that does like 200 mil and then 100 the next week. But the fact that 2 number ones haven't had that, pretty interesting. As I'm looking at the Ragnarok numbers, it never passed a bill. It had 850. Does this have the legs like Multiverse of Madness had or No Way Home to reach there? Or do you think it's going to fizzle out? We don't know week 2 yet, but...
Right. Well, that's a good question.
Over a quarter there, really.
It's a good question because this is only the 4th ever MCU film after, I said, 29 of them to receive a B-level cinema score rating. It's also the 3rd Phase 4 movie to get in the B range after both Eternals and Strange in the Multiverse of Madness scored a B, and a B+. 4 also scored a B+. So while it did a lot of money opening weekend, the people who went out to see it weren't quite as high as they normally are on these MCU movies. And just for a lot of people here, that B+ cinema score rating, and they say, what's wrong with that? That's still a really good grade. Cinema score is almost exclusively in the A range for movies that people are like very happy with and satisfied with. Like, to get below an A means that there are expectations not being met by the movie in some way. So, it's not like a dismissal. Hundreds of millions of dollars being made and people going out to see it. I do kind of feel right now, though. Maybe it's just because I'm seeing a lot of it in film Twitter, angry and aggressive towards things they don't like. But I do think there's going to be a lack of getting your friends to come see it with you the way that maybe some previous ones are. There's no big see the cameo in this one that's going to drive people to see it.
Yeah.
I don't know how much legs it has.
I agree.
Right.
So probably not a bill, but I'd be surprised. I don't know. A lot of movies this year. Cinemas were supposed to die, Zach, and now What the heck, bro?
They're
They're better
healthy.
than ever. Why are they so healthy?
They're back to life. They're Frankenstein or
Uh,
something.
I think you and I have a similar rating though with the Phase 4 rankings. So I don't know if you want to count them down from the bottom up, however you want to see it.
Yeah, I'll go first. So my Phase 4 ranking through 6 movies is I got at the bottom right now Eternals, Widow. I have Thunder above those two at fourth of the six. Third, I have Spider-Man: No Way Home, and the two movies from this phase that I've kind of enjoyed are Shang-Chi, which I have at number 2, and then Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness at number 1. Even though it's not necessarily like a movie I loved, I at least enjoyed my time watching a bit more than I normally do with these movies. But it's a pretty solid run here of like not so solid movies from the MCU.
I'm with you. Eternals is at the bottom of my list. Black Widow above that, barely. Thor: Love and Thunder is that middle piece.
Yeah.
It's just right there. Spider-Man
okay.
above that. Shang-Chi kind of tied with that. And yeah, I'd have to say Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness would be at the top of my Phase 4. But like I wouldn't have that at the top of my all-time list, bro. Like that's way... Yeah, Multiverse is in the middle of the MCU stuff for me.
Not even top 10 for you, right?
I'm not even looking for top 5s at this point. I'm looking for just another top 15 maybe. And we're not getting there. I have not seen anything close to that in Phase 4 for me. So I'm curious to see what everybody else's lists are, how they would rank. I'm seeing some in the chat as well. But look, we're entering that moment where they're trying to get stories that they could be their own little independent movies, but you got to put them with the IP. But then that IP kind of needs to alter the story because it needs to fit into the bigger picture. Phase 4 has probably been one of the weakest phases out of all of them, and it could be the fatigue of the movies. It could be that we don't have something that's built that we're building up to. But I don't know. Maybe we'll rewatch these after the next big Infinity War moment and realize, oh my gosh, it was right in front of us the whole time, and it'll be a masterpiece. Right. And if we're proven wrong, I'll be the first to admit it. But in the meantime, they've been okay. They've been all right in Thor. Yeah. Not my favorite out of Taika's movies. Right in the middle of the Phase 4 for me.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the MCU is in need of some kind of jumpstart, in need of some kind of like surge of energy. And I don't know if that's just returning to some of the filmmakers who've done some of the best MCU stuff. For example, we are supposedly getting that new Black Panther movie later this year, and it's a new Ryan Coogler movie. That's very exciting. We are supposed to get Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a year from now, and that's another new James Gunn movie. James Gunn's pretty good at doing the superhero stuff, so maybe we just need something like that, or maybe it does need to be this like this Thanos type of element, this big overriding thing that will bring everything together, like you're saying. I don't know what it is, but I do kind of think the MCU is a little bit wanting right now.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, they think that you can't judge these on their own. And I think you can judge these because it's not a matter of like all the time that has passed. You can go back to some of the originals and they stand on their own. And the ones that didn't, like Thor the Dark World, I still don't think stands on its own. So as a movie, Thor Love and Thunder, for me, is not going to hit as much as Ragnarok that I could rewatch right now. And I think still hits on every cylinder. You could tell it's the same team, but you could tell that they're coming at it from a completely different point in life. So I'm happy they had a good time making Thor Love and Thunder. I wish I had as much of a good time watching it.
For sure. All right, well, I think that's just about wrapping up our thoughts on Thor Love and Thunder, as well as the current state of the MCU. But definitely let us know your thoughts on the latest Thor movie, your thoughts on Phase 4, and maybe give us your own impromptu Phase 4 ranking. Is this in the middle? Is this at the bottom? Maybe you loved Thor Love and Thunder, and this is the best thing that we've gotten from Marvel recently. I'd be very curious to hear if anybody wants to argue that. But yeah, let us know either by leaving a comment or shooting us an email at intercutpod@gmail.com. But that's all for this edition of After Credits. Catch more from me, Zach Shevich, by following me on Twitter, Instagram, or Letterboxd at ZShevich. That's ZSHEV as in Valkyrie, ICH. And check out my YouTube or TikTok channels at Multiplex Show. Art, where can people find more from you?
You can find me over on Twitter for LME Explain, on Letterboxd at LME Explain, and on YouTube at LME Explain, or every week here on the Intercut podcast where I ask Zach, what's better, Thor Love and Thunder or Jojo Rabbit?
Shoot. Thor Love and Thunder. You gotta make me choose? You really gotta make me choose?
Every week here on the Intercut podcast.
You can listen to every episode of the Intercut podcast on iTunes, Anchor, Spotify, or whatever your favorite podcatcher is. I like Overcast. And then make sure you subscribe not just to the audio podcast, but to the video feed as well on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/IntercutPod, where you can watch our bright smiling faces. So we break down the latest in entertainment, find new episodes of the Intercut Weekend Must Watch streaming on our YouTube channel every Monday around 3 p.m. Eastern. Please leave us a comment, like the videos, and consider heading over to iTunes to give us that much requested 5-star review. Like our Facebook, like our Instagram, follow our Twitter page, and also support us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. All those pages you can find at IntercutPod, and there you'll get updates throughout the week from Art, from me, from all the guests we feature here on Intercut. And check out a link to our Discord in the description for this episode to keep the discussion going with other Intercuties, and maybe we'll drop into throughout the week. But thanks again for tuning in to this edition of After Credits, and until next time, R.I.P. Loki. I don't know.